can we continue to love someone when we just can't choose their path for them? It's a question faced by almost every parent, eventually. When children are young, love is expressed through action. We feed them, we protect them, we teach them, and we make decisions on their behalf. We hold their hands near busy roads and remain awake when they are sick. Then they become adults. Their lives begin to move beyond our reach and beyond our control, and they make decisions that we may not understand. They enter relationships, they embrace ideas, they change direction, take risks, and sometimes wander into situations that can cause us deep anxiety. The instinct to protect doesn't disappear when a child grows older. Yet the authority to direct their lives gradually does. Love must learn a different language. Welcome to Wednesday Wandering with me, Cate Field, a place where I wander about and explore the lives of fascinating people, and I am delighted that you are here. In this final Wednesday Wandering of August, I want to consider that difficult transition through two women. St. Monica, whose feast day falls on the 27th of August, and the American novelist Toni Morrison. Monica lived in Roman North Africa during the 4th century. Morrison was born in industrial Ohio in 1931. One became known through her son's account of her prayers and tears, and the other devoted her literary life to recovering the voices, memories, and interior experiences so often omitted from recorded history. Both women understood that motherhood contains love, fear, memory, grief, and the painful recognition that another human life can never become our possession. Most of what we know about Monica comes from Augustine's Confessions, written more than a decade after her death. And this means that we meet her through the memory of her adult son. She appears within the story he tells about his own mistakes, his ambitions, the relationships, his intellectual searching, and eventually his conversion. Yet she's never entirely just a background figure. Monica was born in around 331 in Tagaste in present-day Algeria, and she grew up in a Christian household and was married while still very young to Patricius, who didn't share her faith. Augustine describes his father as generous in friendship, violent in temper, and unfaithful in marriage. Monica learnt to navigate this unpredictable household with patience and considerable practical intelligence. She also developed a difficult relationship with her mother-in-law, and she developed that into one of mutual trust. Augustine admired his mother's ability to preserve peace. His account reflects a society in which wives had very few legal or social protections and in which female endurance was often praised as a virtue. A modern listener needs to pause here. No woman should be told that holiness requires her to absorb violence or to remain in danger. Monica's strategies belong to a particular life within a particular culture, particular time. We can recognize her courage and resourcefulness while also acknowledging all of those injustices of the conditions that she was expected to endure. Patricius eventually became a Christian shortly before his death. Monica was then left to care for their children, including Augustine, whose brilliant mind and restless temperament had already begun to cause her quite considerable distress. Augustine was intellectually curious, he was ambitious, and he was determined to construct his own life. As a young man, he rejected his mother's Christian faith and became associated with Manichaeism, a religious movement that Monica regarded as a profound error. He pursued a career in rhetoric. He fathered a son with a woman to whom he was never married, and he spent years searching through philosophy, religion, pleasure, and professional success. Monica prayed, and she argued, and she sought the advice of clergy, and she tried to remain close to him. And at times, her love might have seemed almost overwhelming. When Augustine decided to sail from Carthage to Rome, Monica attempted either to prevent him from leaving or to travel with him. So he deceived her. While she was praying in a chapel near the harbour, he boarded the ship and he sailed away. It's one of the most painful scenes in the Confessions. We can imagine her emerging to find that the ship had gone, realising that her adult son had lied because he felt unable to leave freely while she was present. Augustine later wrote about this moment with remorse. Yet it also reveals the complicated edge between loving accompaniment and the desire to control an outcome. Monica's intentions arose out of love. Augustine still needed to make his own journey. She did eventually follow him to Italy, and she joined him in Milan. There, Augustine encountered the preaching of Bishop Ambrose, and he began to reconsider many of his assumptions about Christianity. His conversion came gradually. It involved intellect and friendship and disappointment, but he was reading, there was inner conflict, but there was also grace. Monica could accompany the process, but she couldn't manufacture it. In 387, Augustine was baptized in Milan alongside his friend Alypius and his son Edeodatus. Monica had lived long enough to see the moment for which she had hoped and prayed. Yet she did not live to see Augustine become a priest or a bishop, a theologian or a saint. But she did see the beginning. Mother and son then travelled to Ostia, the port of Rome, intending to return to North Africa. And while waiting for the ship, they stood together at a window overlooking a garden. There, they shared one of the most beautiful conversations described in the Confessions. They spoke about eternal life and tried to imagine a reality beyond the limits of the physical sensation and the ordinary language. Augustine describes their minds reaching upwards together, touching for a moment at the edge of something that they could barely comprehend. At this window, Monica appears as more than the anxious mother of a difficult son. She becomes Augustine's spiritual companion, a woman capable of meeting one of the finest minds of the ancient world in a shared contemplation. Soon afterwards, she became ill. Monica told her sons that the place of her burial no longer mattered. She asked only to be remembered at the altar. She died at Ostia in 387, aged 56. Augustine grieved deeply. He had once fled from her watchful love, and now he discovered the silence left by her absence. The woman who had spent so many years waiting for her son had finally released him into a future that she would never see. More than 15 centuries later, Toni Morrison would examine motherhood, memory, and inheritance with an extraordinary imaginative power. She was born Chloe Ardelia Wofford in Lorain, Ohio in 1931. Her parents had moved north to escape the racial violence and restricted opportunities of the American South at that time. Morrison grew up in a working class family surrounded by songs and stories and folklore and the living presence of family history. She read voraciously, and she developed an early awareness that stories carry far more than entertainment. They preserve identity. They transmit warnings and values, humour, grief and knowledge between the generations. She studied English at Howard University and completed a master's degree at Cornell. After teaching, marrying and having 2 sons, she divorced and began raising her children while developing a demanding career in publishing. As a senior editor at Random House, Morrison helped bring important Black writers and public figures into print. Her editorial work supported voices that the publishing world had frequently marginalised or misunderstood. At the same time, she was becoming a novelist herself. Her first novel, The Bluest Eye, was published in 1970. She wrote much of her early fiction before dawn, rising while it was still dark so that she could work before her children woke up and called for her. There is something immediately recognisable in that arrangement. Her creative life didn't wait for a period of perfect freedom. It developed around employment and commuting and school arrangements and meals and household responsibilities and the needs of 2 sons. Those quiet hours before sunrise became her own. Morrison continued to write, producing novels including Sula, Song of Solomon, Beloved, Jazz and Paradise. In 1993, she became the first Black woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. Her novels often ask how personal memory is shaped by histories that a family or nation would prefer to forget. Morrison describes her method as a form of literary archaeology. She began with the surviving fragments of a life, a document, an image, or an anecdote, or just silence. And through disciplined imagination, she attempted to reconstruct the world surrounding those fragments. History records dates and laws and transactions and public events, but it often leaves the interior life unrecorded. What did a woman fear when her child was taken from her? What private memory returned in the night? How did love survive when families could be separated through sale or violence or forced migration? What happened to grief when there was no safe place in which to express it? Morrison entered these silences through her fiction. Her best known novel, Beloved, was inspired by the documented story of Margaret Garner, an enslaved woman who escaped with her family from Kentucky in 1856. When they were about to be recaptured, Garner killed her young daughter in an attempt to prevent the child from being returned to slavery. Morrison did not turn this history into a simple moral argument. She imagined the devastating emotional, psychological, and spiritual consequences of an action formed within conditions of almost unimaginable violence. Enslavement claimed ownership over the bodies of mothers and children. It threatened every ordinary meaning of protection, family, and home. At the centre of Beloved lies a terrible question. What can maternal love become when the world gives a mother no safe way to protect her child? Morrison's fiction understands that love can be fierce, frightened, it can be possessive and sacrificial and destructive. The same love that wishes to preserve another person may also struggle to recognise that person's separateness. Her mothers are rarely sentimental figures. They are human beings shaped by history and trauma and memory and the resources available to them. And this is one reason her work, I think, continues to speak so powerfully to us today. She allows women moral complexity. A mother can love her child profoundly and still make mistakes. She can act from fear. She can carry guilt for events that she could never have fully controlled anyway. She can remember the past differently from the child who experienced it, even though it was in the same time. St. Monica and Toni Morrison bring us to the difficult space between love and control. Monica wanted Augustine to return to the Christian faith. She prayed, she followed, and she argued, and she waited. And at times, her longing for his conversion became entangled with her desire to keep him close. Eventually, she had to live with the fact that his soul was beyond her management. Morrison's novels repeatedly show the danger of treating another person as an extension of oneself. Children carry family history, yet they also create lives that exceed it. They inherit our stories without being required to repeat them exactly as we would wish. For parents of adult children, this can be one of the hardest lessons of later life. We may see danger more clearly because we've lived longer, and we may recognize those patterns that maybe a younger person just can't see yet. We may know that a decision will bring pain and remain unable to prevent it. At such moments, love can feel helpless. Yet helplessness and uselessness are very different conditions. We can listen, we can speak honestly when honesty is needed. We can maintain appropriate boundaries. We can pray. We can keep a door open where it is safe and wise to do so. We can refuse to make every disagreement into a final rupture. We can also release ourselves from the belief that an adult child's life is a report card on our mothering. Every human life contains temperament and freedom, circumstance, relationships, the chance and the mystery. And parents exert a profound influence, but influence is not authorship. Our children remain the authors of their own choices. Monica's years of prayer didn't function as a lever through which she forced God to produce the ending that she wanted. Prayer gradually changed the person who prayed, as well as accompanying the person for whom she prayed. By the time she stood with Augustine at the window in Ostia, their relationship had changed. They were no longer struggling on opposite sides of a decision. For one luminous moment, they looked together in the same direction. Perhaps that is one form of mature love, the ability to stand beside another person without trying to stand in place of them. There is another connection between Monica and Toni Morrison. Monica's story survives because Augustine remembered her. Augustine recorded her persistence, her faults, her practical wisdom, her tears, and their final beautiful conversation. He preserved the sound of a woman's life within the account of his own life. Morrison spent her career asking whose memories had been left outside the written record, and her fiction restores depth and individuality to people who had too often appeared in history as numbers or property or silent figures in somebody else's story. Both women remind us that love is closely connected with memory. We remember the small child within the adult. We remember the person someone was before grief or illness or disappointment altered them. We carry family stories, sometimes long after the people within them have died. Memory can become a place of tenderness, but it can also become a room in which we repeatedly argue with a past that can't be changed. Love asks us to remember truthfully, and that includes joy, injury, tenderness, failure, and the possibility that another person remembers the same family story quite differently. Perhaps there is someone in your life whose path you wish you could alter. A child, a spouse, a sibling, a friend. They may be making choices that you can't understand. You may be carrying anxiety about a situation that lies beyond your authority. Saint Monica offers the companionship of a woman who knew that pain, that she knew that pain intimately. Toni Morrison reminds us to respect the complexity and interior freedom of every human life. Letting go can coexist with love. And it means releasing the fantasy that vigilance gives us control. It means recognizing what belongs to us and what belongs to another person. And it allows love to become more spacious, honest, and attentive. So today, perhaps we might sit quietly with 3 questions. What is mine to carry? What belongs to somebody else? And how might I continue to love them without trying to live their life for them? There may be no tidy answer to that because it's quite tricky. And there can still be faithful presence, an open heart, and the courage to stand by a window beside someone we love, looking together towards a future that neither of us can fully see. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so. And I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.